So welcome to Gladiator 2020. This is the one-on-one high school mock trial national championship, world championship. We have students applying from all over the globe. This year we have 36 competitors. And I think we actually may have our strongest field yet because this year students didn't have to worry about travel costs or anything else. We really were able to get a tremendous field. Of course, this year's event is a little bit different than others. This is mock trial by Zoom. And so, of course, the downside is we don't get to see all of you in person. As Bill McGinnis said, we don't get to give all of you bagels for breakfast and Mexican food for lunch in Newport Beach. But the good news is we're able to recruit a national field of competitors and a national field of judges. So we have judges from dozens of states, and we are greatly appreciative of your time and expertise. I've told the students we have an unparalleled judging panel this year, and that's because of all of you. So thank you so much for volunteering your time. We literally couldn't do this event without your generosity. So what we're gonna do tonight is, as briefly as possible, try to walk you through 4 things: how you're gonna judge by Zoom, how the competition works, how the scoring system works, and answer any questions you have. So I'm gonna turn it over to my colleague, Sue Johnson. Sue Johnson is the Director of Forensics at Patrick Henry. Those of you who did Empire Competition, remember her as the person who did everything under the sun. And she's going to be in charge of our breakout rooms and all things related to judges. So Sue's going to walk you through how the competition works from the Zoom perspective. Sue?
Great. Well, welcome everyone. We really do appreciate you being here. I'm going to talk about how the Zoom aspects of the competition works, and we'll have you practice a few things. If you do have any questions, then please, speak up. You don't have to worry about raising your hand or anything. So first off, for signing on, we're going to ask that you please use a laptop or a desktop if possible, a tablet if absolutely necessary, but in any case, please don't use a phone. We do ask that you use a laptop or a desktop because then you have the full functionality of Zoom, and everything does not work on tablets, so please do use laptop if you can. We will email you the link to the Zoom round, the Zoom link about an hour before the round. And if you click on that, it'll also tell you what courtroom that you're going to be in. Justin says, if you do have questions, feel free to send them to me or to the group in the chat. So that's another way you can communicate. Okay. So we'll email you out the link to the Zoom about an hour before the round, and you'll just want to click on that link. It'll bring you right here to the main room. We will then, after a brief period of time when everyone's checked in, send you to breakout rooms. The trials themselves will take part in breakout rooms that are numbered 1 through 9. And in order to make sure that we get you in the correct room with the teams that we're expecting you to judge, we'll ask you when you do come in to change your screen name to start with your courtroom number. And again, that number will be in the email we send you. So as an example, we've got Donna Hecht as a presiding judge in courtroom 4 as an example, or Ms. Bader as a juror in courtroom 7. And just now to make sure that you know how to do it, in case you haven't done this before, we'll have you go ahead and change your name. If you hover over your own little screen icon thing, there's on the upper right-hand corner, there's 3 dots. And so if you click on the 3 dots, a little drop down comes, one of which options is to rename. If you click on rename, it'll bring up whatever name you've got now, but we'll have you pretend that we're all in courtroom 10. So if you'll just type a 10 and then a dash, and then you can name yourself as either a juror or presiding judge, whichever one you feel like being tonight, and then just hit OK, and your name should change, and that'll be the name that we see when we're getting ready to assign you to a round. So if everyone would go ahead and just do that now so that we know that you are familiar with how to do it. That's the first thing we'll ask you to do when you come into the room on Saturday or Sunday, whichever day you're judging. So I see lots of people are getting it. If anyone has a question or a problem, feel free to just chat or speak up.
See, I'm not seeing the 3 dots in my upper right hand. I'm on a laptop.
And you're on a laptop, okay. And are you hovering over your own little tile that shows yourself?
I had it there and then I lost it. So let me see if I can get it back here.
Yeah. So get your mouse or whatever.
There's 3 dots. Okay, got it. And rename. Okay, so I'm putting in number 10.
Yes. Super. I see. Looks like nearly everybody's done it. So anyway, that's what we'll ask you to do when you come in on Saturday or Sunday, and you'll know which courtroom number in the email that we send you. So moving on, that's great. We also want to go over how you want to set your audio and video to make the round the best experience for you. We want to make sure you don't have, dozens of tiles that you're having to look at of people. So what we will ask is that when we put you in the breakout room, scoring judges should go ahead and mute your video and your audio. And that way you won't show up on the screen at all. Leave it that way throughout the entire trial. And then at the end of the trial, after you've submitted your ballots, you'll turn on your audio and video when you're giving comments. Go ahead and turn on your video at that point and then audio when you're speaking. Presiding judges, it's a bit different. We do ask you to leave your video always on because we want the competitors to see you. And you'll leave your audio muted unless you're making a ruling on objections or speaking to the teams as a whole. So again, if you're a scoring judge, you're going to be muted and have your video muted, and a presiding judge, sound muted, video on. And just to make sure that everyone knows where to find those buttons, we have this nice picture of Justin and Abby. And down in the lower left-hand corner, you should see on your screen a place where you can mute yourself and start or stop your video. So presumably it looks like everybody's muted for the most part. You know how to do that. That's what you'll do as well. We also want you to hide for yourself non-video participants. And where you find to do that is down there at the arrow that says start or stop video. To the right of that is a little arrow. We'll have you go ahead and practice that now. You click on that little arrow, again, a little drop-down thing comes up, one of which is video settings. If you click on video settings, then a whole host of things will come up, one of which choices is to hide non-video participants. And we'll ask you to go ahead and click that. Certainly when you're judging, hide all non-video participants. And that way those that are muted won't show up on your screen, and you'll only be able to focus on those that are competing, speaking, those that you want to be able to evaluate. Does anyone have any questions about that, or we're all good? So you can see a bunch of different things come up, one of which is hide non-video participants. All right, super. So you're going to hide all non-video participants. We also ask that you change the view that you're using as the trial proceeds to enable you to see those that are should be front and center to help you evaluate them. During the speeches, openings and closings, or pre-trial, use the speaker view, and you're going to find that in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. We'll show you that in just a moment. And for every other part of the trial during examinations, we'll ask you to keep it in gallery view. The only people you should see in the gallery view should be the presiding judge, the directing attorney, the crossing attorney, and the student witness. And they should all leave their videos on the entire time and be muted unless they're actually speaking. But we want you to be able to see each of them so that you can fairly evaluate them. Any questions about any of that? And then the next thing, okay, we're going to talk about is side-by-side mode. And this is a mode that we'd like you to put your screen into. It helps you to understand and see the exhibits and the competitors that are speaking. It's the best way to see both the people so that they're not little tiny people up in the corner, but also the exhibits that they're going to screen share with you. To find that, at the top center of your screen, beside where it says you're viewing Justin Bernstein's screen or whoever the student is that's sharing, there's a little choice called View Options. If you click on the little arrow with that, it'll give you the drop down as you see here. Choose side-by-side mode. And if you go ahead and do that now, we'd ask you to go ahead and do it now, make sure that you can find it. It should stay in that mode when you come back in to judge the trials. Unless you change it, it'll stay like that. So everybody go ahead and choose side-by-side mode now, because we want to have you practice with the functionality of that. Okay, everybody good? All right, so when you've got it in side-by-side mode, you'll notice that there's a little tiny two little gray lines similar to where the arrow is on the screen that Justin has. And if you hover your mouse or grab hold of that, you can move the screen back and forth. You can actually make the pictures of the people, take up more of the screen, make the exhibit smaller, move it back and forth. And we'd ask you to do that when students are screen sharing. You should only have a couple of the people on that are speaking, the witness and the directing attorney, and you'll be able to see the exhibit. Most of the time you want to have it about half and half so you actually can see the students that are competing that you're trying to evaluate and judge their expressions and how in control they are of the courtroom. So has everybody had a chance to try that? You're all familiar with how that works.
That's Heisman. He's a good boy.
Yes, Justin's dog Heisman is definitely a good boy. So with no further ado, Justin will move on to how the competition works if we're all good on the Zoom functionality.
Any questions on the Zoom operations before we talk about the competition side and the scoring? I'll check my chat and see if there's any questions there. Okay.
Super.
Just lots of comments about how handsome Heisman is. All
Thank
smart comments. Okay. So the format of these trials is really quick. You're likely not to see shorter trials than these, and that's because they are one lawyer per side, one witness per side. And each lawyer has a second chair to share their screen. So if you see them standing back and they're talking to you and their screen's being shared, it's not magic. They've got a teammate who's also logged into the Zoom who's sharing their screen, just as I was doing when Sue was chatting. So one thing you should know is that this competition has, like every other competition, different rules on invention of fact. We have really strict rules on direct examination. The way it works on direct is that witnesses are limited to the facts that they've been given or any necessary inferences, what must be true, right? Not what wish it were true, not could be true, not it would really help my side if this were maybe possibly true. It has to either be stated in the witness's statement or must be true. On cross-examination, however, witnesses, if they're asked a question on cross to which their statement is silent, the witnesses can say whatever they want as long as it doesn't contradict their witness statement. And that's because of the old axiom we all have heard, which is don't ask a question unless you already know the answer. So on cross-examination, if the attorney asks a question, they should not be scored well if they then impeach if they just don't like the witness's answer. Okay. This year's case is United States versus Kara Bassett. That sounds a little bit like Carole Baskin because this case is based on the Carole Baskin storyline from The Tiger King. She is the elephant queen. She owns an elephant park in Florida, inherited after her husband, Don Lewis, disappeared one day. You may see videos and photos of elephants from the park. Most of the exhibits in this case have been pre-admitted. In fact, dozens of them have been pre-admitted. And when I say pre-admitted, I mean they're already in evidence when the trial starts. And we did that so that way students can really exploit the advantages of Zoom, which is the ability to screen share and put exhibits in front of the jury. And also so they didn't spend their time on screen with you focusing on authenticity and instead on storytelling. So if you see them referring to exhibits and wondering why are they talking about that, it's likely already in evidence. Exhibits 5 through, I believe, 34 are already in evidence. You're welcome to read the case, but you don't need to. You got the case link in the email. A few notes for our presiding judges, and if you're presiding this weekend, you've already gotten an email from us asking you kindly to preside. It's a closed universe. They can't make up additional case law. They can't use real life case law. They're limited to the federal rules of evidence. We ask judges that you let the students argue objections more than they would get to in real life. You'll know how you want to rule, I suspect, as soon as they object, but give them an opportunity to go back and forth. But if there's an objection as to leading, I don't think we need 3 back and forths to figure out what the question is leading. You want to let them argue the substantive objections so that way you and your colleagues can differentiate the students. We have constructive sidebars. Obviously, nobody is going to approach, both because we want everybody to hear and this is on Zoom. The scope of cross-examination is not limited to the scope of direct, and that's because the students can't recall the witness, and so we're going to let them cover any topics they want on cross-examination. The only motions they can make are a motion to strike evidence that's been excluded and a motion under 615 to constructively sequester the witnesses. That way they can't say, oh, I was in court when so-and-so testified, I heard them, and so now I have a new opinion. The students are not permitted to ask for recess unless there's an emergency, and that's because we don't think you're going to need one. The trials run about an hour, and we want to make sure that they run on time for you and for the competition. So if you want or need a break, of course, you're free to take them. The students can't ask you for one unless it's an emergency, and wanting time to prepare their closing argument is not an emergency. Any questions on the rules from our presiding judges? Okay, so great question from Chris D'Amicio, one of our students of the UCLA trial team. He says, what's the procedure if competitors make a material invention objection or different type of challenge to invention? And the answer is they can't make an objection to an invention of fact. Even though some high school competitions do that, we want our students, selected among the top in the country, to deal with this the way that real lawyers do, which is by impeachment. If they think there's a contradiction, impeach. If they think there's an omission, they can impeach on cross-examination. So there's no objection, liar, liar, their pants are on fire. Can't do that. Okay, so how does our scoring system work? We like to call this the easiest scoring system ever. You're gonna get your ballot for each round about an hour before each trial. We'll take a look at that ballot right now. Thought we would. Hold on one second. Let me find the ballot. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Got it. Okay. So this is what your ballot's going to look like. And we'll fill it out together. So we'll fill in our name. Suppose that it's Katie Osborne. And Katie's going to be in courtroom 1. And she's judging Marcia versus Johnny, a classic attorney matchup. And she scores this one like the real thing. A lot of these check marks are going to the defense. Defense wins opening, cross, definitely winning use of exhibits after the glove. Theme and theory and closing, we'll give the prosecution objections and direct examination. The witness scoring, she thinks the witnesses for the prosecution are more real and more engaging, and higher score for credibility for the defense witness. I skipped over what you should be looking at, I apologize. So for most of these, it's pretty straightforward, opening, direct, cross, and closing. For use of exhibits, it's which side uses the exhibits better in trial. And we included that usually in these competitions, but especially this year, given the ability to screen share and perform on Zoom. Theme and theory is how well they use their theme and theory throughout all of trial. For witness scoring, realism is how authentic the witness seems. Do they seem like a real person? Engagement is the charisma they bring to the stand, whether they make the jury want to listen to them. And credibility is whether or not you believe them, whether you find them trustworthy. Not whether you find the character trustworthy, but how well the student portrays the witness in a credible manner. So if the witness is written as somebody with criminal convictions or a doctor with a sterling record, that's not what you're evaluating it here. It's whether the witness seems prepared, whether they're inventing facts, whether they're being responsive on cross-examination, or on the other hand, they look like an advocate who's trying to help one side or the other. So that's what you're evaluating for credibility. You then identify which team had a better second chair, that is which side had better use of technology and cohesion as a team. And so we'll say here, the prosecution gets the check mark. And here for comments, you're welcome to include something. Where's our food? And then hit submit. So we're looking back now at our PowerPoint. A few suggestions as you score. You don't need to score as you go. We usually say that in college competitions, score as you go. Here you can't actually do that because you won't have seen both directs at the same time. You won't have seen both crosses. And so those check marks, you won't know who you're giving the check mark to. You're evaluating the student's performance, not the merits of the case. So you might think the prosecution has a rock solid case where there's tons of reasonable doubt. That's not what you're evaluating. It's how well they use the facts that they've been given. And when you're scoring, it's 1 check mark per category. Don't give them both a check mark. Don't say neither one was that great. I'm not giving anybody a check mark. Nobody gets an extra check mark. It's 1 check mark per category. We'd ask these score candidly. Sometimes at these events, we say, hey, these are high school students. I don't want them to feel bad. And so I'm going to make sure the ballot is 4-3 or 5-2. The first thing we look at when evaluating which of the 4 out of 36 students advance to semifinals is the number of check marks they've earned. So a 7-0 ballot is very different than a 4-3 ballot. If you think it's 7-0, please score at 7-0. If you think it's 6-1, please score at 6-1. We didn't include written feedback on this ballot because we have fewer jurors at this competition than the college version, and we have a little more time for post-trial feedback. So we'll do oral comments like we usually do at Gladiator. If you have any technical difficulties during the round, that is, if you get disconnected and you have to log back in, that's totally fine. You can miss a moment of trial. We'd ask that you only submit the ballot, though, if you feel like you've been able to meaningfully compare all the participants in every category. So if you missed all the openings, you can't fill out that ballot. If you missed a moment of direct examination, I'm sure you can. So let me check and see what questions we have. I'll pause there. Okay, so great question. What's the difference between use of exhibits from that first list and better co-chair? So use of exhibits might be the persuasiveness of the exhibits, using them at the right time, making good arguments about them. And so that's related in part to the attorney. The better co-chair might also be that person responding to something in trial by creating something new or pulling up something unexpected and helping the attorney out. I think you're right, Jay, that we're likely to see a huge overlap between those two things, but you might be able to differentiate. Are the witness and the attorney from the same school? The answer is no. In fact, they'll never be from the same school. They don't get to prepare for weeks. They get 15 minutes to prepare their witness before each trial. Sanjeev asked, how do you check whether you're evaluating or presiding for a given round? We will email everybody before each trial to let you know who the presiders are. But if you've heard from us already, then you know you're going to be presiding at least once. If not, we're going to have you serve as jurors. In general, we've leaned on our lawyers rather than our law students to be our presiding judges. And of course, if you're an actual judge, we would love for you to preside. Okay. At the end of the trial, you're going to submit your ballots, as I did. I hit submit, and we'll let you know when all the ballots are in. Usually only takes a moment or two to check that all the ballots are in, since they're being submitted on Google Forms. And at that point, the bailiff in your round will let you know to start your feedback. We'd ask you to keep your comments on the shorter side. It doesn't have to be 10 seconds. You know, great job, don't go to law school, other advice, things like that. But we do want you to try to limit it because most students will never be doing these roles again. That is, during the 4 preliminary trials, each student does each role once. And so if you really didn't like their prosecution theme, don't worry, they're probably never going to do it again. And they will never play the witnesses again during the competition. So for example, maybe you give each student one suggestion on how to improve the next time they perform, or you tell each student their favorite moment from trial. What you don't want to do is say, okay, I wrote this down for your opening statement. Prosecutor, here are my comments. A minute later, defense attorney, here are my comments for your opening. You want to go student by student, not element by element. So I'll open it up now to questions. What questions do people have? Someone asked about, Judge Hecht asked about timekeeping. The students' second chairs will be doing the timekeeping, and they will alert you by chat. They're not allowed to appear on screen. They'll alert you by chat to say whether or not somebody's gone over time. And they are going to communicate with each other to make sure they're on the same page. Are students graded on their technical prowess? Are we holding technical difficulties against them? If the student has an internet interruption and falls off screen, please don't hold that against them. Similarly, if they have a fancy background and they look like they're in a courtroom, or if they look like they're in their home, that shouldn't be something that you count against them in either direction. We want you to score them based on their advocacy skills. Now, some of that is the use of the technology. If they're using Zoom in an effective way, if they're integrating exhibits in an effective way, if they thought about camera angles and where they stand and how close they are to the screen, those are decisions that students can all make regardless of the equipment they have. And so I think you're free to include that as part of your analysis. Judge Bro asked a question. Are the judges scoring also? Yes. Everybody who is going to be in the room, other than the participants, gets a ballot. So we ask you to fill out the ballot. We know sometimes it's difficult to do double duty as a presiding judge and scorer, but given that this is just check marks, we are confident that everybody will be able to handle it. Other questions? Will people be power matched? Yes. So rounds 1 and 2 are predetermined. Round 3 and round 4 will be based on the results from the earlier trials. And after round 4, the top 4 folks are moving on to the semifinals.
One other thing just to be aware of as judges, that you're not allowed to see the same student in the same role twice, and you can't, in fact, because they don't play the same role twice, but there may be instances where you see a student as, say, the prosecution attorney in one round and you see them as the defense witness in another round. That's not a conflict. I just wanted to make you aware of that, should that happen in your trial.
Thank you. And we don't expect that there will be any conflicts, in part because we've tried to pre-clear it. We sent all students a list of the judges and said, hey, do you know anybody, can't have your uncle judging you, that kind of thing. And so the students have been really helpful there. And of course, we know some of you too. Judge Harkavy asks, Can people not involved in the competition watch any of the rounds? Yes, but not live. We don't want to overload the Zoom room's capacity with bandwidth. And Sue's assigning everybody individual breakout rooms, so we don't want to overload Sue. So what we're doing is recording all of the trials. All of them are going to be recorded, and as soon as the competition's over, we'll make all of those public. And so anybody who wants to see those, I'm happy to include the link to all of you as well. Jenny, a former Gladiator, and now Cal Golden Bear, Go Bears, asks, can they use demos, and if so, where should that be scored? Yes. In fact, they submitted their demos for pre-approval. Today's their deadline, so they're sending them in right now. The fact that it's been approved for use, however, does not mean that it's immune from evidentiary objection. It just means that we've decided it doesn't invent material facts, and they're permitted to use it in trial, subject to all of our presiding judges' rulings. What happens if somebody drops out of a call? This is likely going to happen at some point. When we had our college event a month ago, I got a phone call, and it was from one of our semifinalists saying, hey, I need to get back in the Zoom room. We think, though, that students are going to be in good shape. We've told them to hardwire their internet, and at the suggestion of Professor Heller, to use phones and have Zoom app download on their phones, so that way that's a backup in case they need to use data instead of internet to get on. But if that happens, we'll pause the trial, we'll get them back on, and we'll get going. We don't want anybody to be performing without both of the lawyers in the room. Can we make the host aware of any conflicts when the names are given to you? Sure. Each room is going to have a bailiff. So if you know one of the competitors and feel like you can't judge them fairly, that's the standard. If you've seen them before, that's fine. But if you can't judge them fairly, let us know and we'll swap you out. Michaela Wasiri, the winner of the Statue of Justice, who just graduated from UCLA School of Law as the best trial student in last year's class, asks, how strict should judging be in terms of keeping evidence out? The answer is, rule as you think the ruling should go. These students are not novices. They are selected as the best anywhere, and they know the rules of evidence, or at least they should. So if you think that something should be excluded, keep it out. Sydney Gaskins asked, how long should we give comments for after the round? I would say ideally, the total comments per judge are between 1 minute and 2 minutes. The bailiffs have been told to exercise the mute function if they think that anybody is going too long. And I think some of them are excited to do it. How do we deal with timing discrepancies? Somebody asked if they occur. I don't anticipate that occurring because the bailiffs, the timekeeper for each side will be in contact with each other. But if there is a discrepancy, use your best judgment. Is there a pretrial where they constructively hand us documents? No. We're going to be sending all of our presiding judges an electronic notebook which has all the exhibits. That way you can follow along when they say they want to authenticate an exhibit. Other questions? Is there going to be an award for best second chair? Yes, there will be an award for best second chair. To what extent, if any, should the second chair affect our evaluation of the gladiators? I would say it shouldn't. I mean, obviously there's going to be some effect. If they have a great second chair, they're likely to be stronger in use of exhibits. A second chair is allowed to communicate with them during trial, so you may see their excellence reflected in their performance, but you're evaluating the advocate performing on screen. Do we initiate a start right on time or wait for a go-ahead? You can go ahead and get started when you get to your courtrooms. If you have a conflict, let us know and we'll swap somebody into another room, but you can go ahead and get started. Looks like that's all the questions. If anybody has questions that occur to them later, how many scores per room? We expect somewhere between 3 and 5 ballots per room, so somewhere between a presider +2 and a presider +4, depending on the room. We'll have a bailiff in each room to make sure things are going smoothly. Thank you everybody so much for coming to the orientation. If you have additional questions, shoot me an email. And we'll make this recording available if anybody wants to go back and watch, either to check and answer your question or to see that handsome dog one more time. Okay? Thank you so much for coming to judge, and thank you for your help this weekend. We really appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.